The world didn't end with a bang, but with the sharp, deafening slam of a judge's gavel that seemed to fracture the very air in the silent courtroom. But the judge's gaze, a pair of piercing blue eyes that had seen through countless lies, wasn't fixed on the lawyers or the accused. Her eyes were locked onto me, or rather, onto the single faded photograph I was clutching in my trembling hand, its worn edges a testament to a secret held for a generation. Across the cavernous room, my colleagues, the very architects of my professional and personal nightmare, sat frozen. Sarah, the office queen bee, and Mike, her cruel court jester, were ashen-faced, their usual smirks wiped clean and replaced with raw, unfiltered shock. They had orchestrated this downfall, spinning a web of lies so intricate they were certain I would be entangled and destroyed. They believed this was my breaking point, the final act of my career. They couldn't have been more wrong. Their calculated cruelty had inadvertently unearthed a truth buried for decades, a truth so profound it would leave every single person in this room, especially the formidable judge on her bench, utterly speechless. This wasn't my end. This was my reckoning. Before I continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, and leave your like. Helps a lot. My name is Aisha Thompson, and for the first 28 years of my existence, I believed my story was a simple, heartwarming fairy tale. I was the chosen one. My parents, John and Mary Thompson, were a gentle, loving couple from the rolling hills of rural Ohio, their kindness as constant as the Midwestern sky. They told me the story of my arrival so many times it became a part of my own DNA. They had traveled the world, seen its wonders, but returned home with an ache in their hearts, a quiet emptiness that only the laughter of a child could fill. And then, as if by magic, I appeared in their lives. I was their miracle, a tiny baby girl with skin the color of rich, fertile earth and a halo of tight, dark curls that defied gravity. They gave me the name Aisha, a name they discovered in a book about a powerful queen from a distant land, a name that always felt like both a precious crown and a heavy costume. Growing up in our little town was like living in two separate worlds simultaneously. Inside the four walls of our home, I was cocooned in a fortress of unconditional love and acceptance. The house was a symphony of sensory comforts, the perpetual sweet aroma of my mom's famous apple pie, the low, gentle rumble of my dad's humming as he worked in his woodshop, and the unwavering warmth of their affection. I was simply their daughter. But the moment I stepped outside our front door, I became an anomaly, a living, breathing question mark in a landscape of sameness. In a town where everyone resembled my blue-eyed, fair-skinned parents, my presence prompted stares, whispers, and unasked questions. At school, I was the sole brown face in a sea of white, a stark reminder of my otherness. Our family photographs, which my mom proudly displayed on the mantelpiece, were a beautiful, yet jarring testament to our unique little unit. 3 souls bound together by a fierce love, 2 of whom shared a lineage and a history that was a closed book to me. That persistent feeling of being an outsider, of not quite belonging, didn't break me. It ignited a fire within me. It forged a relentless determination to prove my worth, to demonstrate that I was more than just the adopted girl. I couldn't just fit in, I had to excel. I had to be smarter, work harder, and achieve more than anyone else, as if my accomplishments could somehow bridge the invisible gap between me and the world around me. I threw myself into my studies, devouring books and knowledge with a hunger that was insatiable. My grades became my shield and my sword. I graduated as valedictorian of my high school, which led me to Northwestern University. It was there, amidst the vibrant diversity of a big city, that I finally began to blossom. For the first time, I wasn't just the black adopted girl. I was Aisha, the brilliant student who could dissect a complex marketing case study with surgical precision. After a series of intensely competitive internships, I finally achieved my ultimate goal, a coveted position at my dream company. Harper & Sons was a revered titan in the fiercely competitive Chicago marketing landscape. Its offices were a modern cathedral of glass and gleaming steel, perched high above the bustling city, humming with the electric thrum of ambition and creativity. The design was all about transparency, glass walls, open-plan desks, supposedly to foster a free flow of ideas. I remember walking in on my first day, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm of pure terror and exhilarating hope against my ribs. This was it. The culmination of my entire life's work. I was assigned a corner desk, a small space to call my own, with a sliver of a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan. I had a polished nameplate that read Aisha Thompson. I had a future laid out before me. I truly believed I had finally arrived, that I had earned my place at the table. I was so blissfully, painfully naive. The sleek, welcoming facade of Harper & Sons was nothing more than a carefully constructed mask, and lurking just beneath its polished surface was an ugliness I could never have prepared for. The initial weeks were a whirlwind of mastering new software, memorizing a dizzying number of new faces, and navigating the relentless, unspoken pressure to perform and impress. I resolved to keep my head down, to let the quality of my work speak for itself. My strategy was simple. If my contributions were undeniable, then I, in turn, would become undeniable. But the whispers started almost immediately, quiet at first, like the subtle rustling of leaves that signals an approaching storm. I'd walk towards the coffee machine, and animated conversations would suddenly dip into hushed murmurs. I'd catch people's heads turning in my direction, followed by a quick, shared look that spoke volumes. The camaraderie of the office seemed to have invisible walls, and I was perpetually on the outside. Then, one afternoon, the whispers found their voice. I was walking down the hallway, my mind on a project deadline, when I passed a small group of associates huddled together. One of them, a notoriously loud salesman named Mike, muttered just loud enough for me to hear. "So, who's the diversity hire?" A beat of silence, then a few nervous, suppressed chuckles. The words struck me with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. I froze for a split second, my back still to them, a hot, shameful flush creeping up my neck and spreading across my face. Diversity hire. Not Aisha Thompson, top of her class from Northwestern. Not the woman who had aced 3 grueling rounds of interviews and a demanding skills test. Just a box they'd been required to tick. A surge of fury and humiliation washed over me. I wanted to spin around to confront them, to demand they see me for who I was, but my throat closed up, my voice trapped. I just kept walking, the sound of their stifled laughter echoing behind me like a cruel judgment. That single moment was the first major crack in the perfect facade of my dream job. Soon those cracks began to spiderweb, spreading through every aspect of my workday. The primary architects of my slow-motion torment were Sarah and Mike. Sarah was a lead account executive, the undisputed golden girl of the office. She was a picture of immaculate perfection, from her sharply angled bob to her impeccably tailored designer suits. She moved through the office with an aura of untouchable authority and entitlement. Mike was her loyal shadow, her obnoxious hype man. He was brash and arrogant, wielding his cruelty like a blunt instrument, always with a smug grin plastered on his face as if it were all just harmless fun. Their campaign against me was not a direct assault, but a slow, corrosive poison, a death by 1,000 paper cuts. It often began under the guise of what they passed off as humor. "Aisha, I'm just so fascinated," Sarah would begin in the middle of the crowded break room. Her tone a masterclass in feigned curiosity and condescension. "Do you braid your hair like that yourself? Or is that like a cultural thing you have to do?" Inevitably, all eyes would swivel to me, putting me on display. I'd feel my face burn as my mind raced, trying to formulate the perfect response, one that was polite but not weak, informative but not defensive. But before I could even part my lips, Mike would jump in with perfect timing. "Careful, Sarah. We have to protect our token, right? Gotta keep the diversity numbers up for the clients." And then, the ripple of laughter would spread through the room, each chuckle a pinprick that made me feel smaller and more exposed. The isolation was surgical and complete. Invitations to after-work happy hours, which were a crucial part of the office social fabric, were circulated in a group chat that I was pointedly never added to. They would organize team lunches and accidentally forget to include me in the email chain. The pain of watching them leave as a boisterous, laughing group while I sat alone at my desk was a physical ache. The silence of the suddenly empty office would become deafening, and the half-eaten salad in front of me would taste like ash. I tried to convince myself that it didn't matter, that I was there to build a career, not a social life. But the loneliness was a heavy cloak I couldn't seem to take off. The break room became a minefield, their personal stage for daily humiliations. I would dread having to heat up my lunch. The moment I walked in, a sudden, charged silence would descend. Then came the subtle nudges, the sideways glances, and the barely concealed smirks. One afternoon, as I stood waiting by the microwave, I heard one of Mike's cronies snicker. "Careful not to bump her elbow, guys, she might take it the wrong way." Another wave of laughter followed, this time louder, more brazen, and openly directed at me. Hot, sharp tears pricked the back of my eyes. I blinked them back with fierce determination, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I snatched my food, not caring if it was still cold, and fled back to the relative safety of my desk, eating my lunch with the door closed, a knot of anxiety so tight in my stomach I could barely swallow. Quitting felt like an impossible option. I had student loans, rent, and bills to pay. More than that, a stubborn, fiery part of me, the part forged in my childhood, refused to be chased away by their ignorance. I had earned my place here. I deserved to be here. But the emotional cost was becoming unbearable. I would come home to my small, quiet apartment, and the professional armor I meticulously put on each morning would crumble into dust. I'd collapse onto my couch, and the tears I had held back all day would finally break free, hot and furious. The constant gaslighting made me start to doubt my own reality. Was I being overly sensitive? Was I misinterpreting harmless jokes? The mental gymnastics were utterly exhausting. One night I finally broke down and called my mom, my voice thick and choked with unshed tears. "They're making fun of me, Mom," I sobbed into the phone. For being me. For being different." Her voice, usually my greatest source of comfort, was filled with a pain that couldn't quite reach mine. "Oh, honey. They're just ignorant, small-minded people. You are so much stronger than them. The best thing you can do is hold your head high and not let them see they're getting to you." I knew she meant well, that she loved me fiercely, but she couldn't truly understand. She viewed the world from a position where her sense of belonging was a given, never questioned. My dilemma was a form of torture. If I fought back, I risked being branded with the career-ending stereotype of the angry black woman. But if I remained silent, I felt a piece of my soul corroding a little more each day. I was utterly and completely trapped. Just when I believed I couldn't sink any lower, a lifeline appeared out of nowhere. It came in the form of the Reynolds account. This wasn't just any project. It was the biggest, most prestigious account in the entire firm, a multi-million-dollar campaign that could make a career overnight. And for a reason I couldn't possibly fathom, Mr. Harper, the firm's stoic and intimidating founder, appeared at my desk one afternoon and dropped the massive file right in front of me. "Thompson," he'd said, his expression unreadable. "Let's see what you've got." A surge of pure, unadulterated hope, an emotion I hadn't felt in months, coursed through me. This was my chance. This was my opportunity to create a campaign so innovative, so brilliant, that it would permanently silence the whispers and the jeers. I threw myself into the project with a desperate, all-consuming focus. My apartment transformed into a war room, its walls covered with mood boards, consumer data charts, and market analysis. I poured every ounce of my talent, my passion, and my very soul into crafting the perfect presentation. On the day of the pitch, the atmosphere in the main conference room was thick with tension. Mr. Harper sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his face an inscrutable mask. I took a deep, centering breath and began. I was in my element. The words flowed effortlessly, my passion for the campaign evident in every slide. I could feel the energy in the room shifting from skepticism to genuine interest. I saw heads nodding in approval. Even Mr. Harper, a man famous for his stony demeanor, seemed impressed. For a moment I was soaring, convinced I had finally won. And then Sarah stood up. She didn't wait for me to finish my closing remarks. She simply rose from her chair, her arms crossed, a smug, self-satisfied smile playing on her lips. "This is cute, Aisha," she began, her voice dripping with syrupy condescension. "It's a really nice effort. But does it truly speak to our core demographic?" She paused for dramatic effect, her eyes sweeping across the room, making everyone a co-conspirator. "You know, real Americans." The words landed like a physical slap across my face. Real Americans. The ugly implication hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Mike, never one to miss a cue, leaned into his neighbor and whispered, just loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Yeah, I'm not sure everyone shops at. You know, whatever stores you do." This time, the laughter wasn't stifled or suppressed. It was open, cruel, and unrestrained. Felt like a public stoning. My heart hammered against my ribs as if it were trying to escape my chest. My hands gripped the polished edge of the table, my knuckles turning white. My voice, when I finally found it, was shaking but steady. The data I presented shows an 85% positive engagement projection across all key demographics, including the core demo you're referring to. I tried desperately to drag the conversation back to the realm of facts and figures, but it was useless. They were drowning out my professionalism with their crude, unified chuckles. I looked desperately towards the head of the table, my eyes pleading with Mr. Harper to intervene. He simply cleared his throat, looked down at his papers, a flicker of discomfort on his face, but he said nothing. His silence was the loudest sound in the room. That afternoon, a cold, impersonal email landed in my inbox. Mr. Harper was officially reassigning the Reynolds account to Sarah and her team. The reason cited was a vague, corporate-speak platitude. Better for team fit. He didn't even have the decency or the courage to tell me to my face. The defeat was absolute. And that night, as I sat in the dark of my apartment, the first anonymous email arrived. The subject line was just my name. The body of the message contained 3 simple, chilling words. "Go back home. If you're still here with me, don't forget to subscribe, activate notifications, leave your like, and share this video with someone." The humiliating loss of the presentation wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new, more terrifying phase of harassment. The anonymous emails became a daily torment. "Go back to where you came from, token. Nobody wants you here." Sometimes it was just a picture of an elbow, a digital version of their breakroom taunts. Then came the physical notes, left on my keyboard for me to find in the morning. "Elbow room only for you." My hands shook as I started documenting everything, taking pictures of the notes and screenshots of the emails. I debated going to HR, but I had seen how they operated. They were a department designed to protect the company, not the employees, especially not against their star performers. The constant, gnawing anxiety was becoming a permanent fixture in my life. Desperate for an escape, I drove home to Ohio for a weekend, needing the comforting embrace of my parents and the familiarity of my childhood home. One rainy Saturday afternoon, I found myself in the attic, searching for an old photo album. Tucked away in a dusty corner was a small wooden trunk containing my baby clothes, my first shoes, and my adoption papers. As I sifted through the memorabilia, my fingers brushed against a thick, sealed manila envelope I had never seen before. Scrawled across the front in my mother's familiar handwriting were the words, "Do not open until you are 30. My 30th birthday was still months away. But something, an urgent, undeniable instinct, compelled me to ignore the instruction. My hands trembled as I tore open the seal. Inside was a single, yellowed sheet of notepaper and a faded color photograph. The photo was of a newborn baby, me. But the arms holding me were not my mother Mary's. They belonged to a strikingly beautiful black woman, a woman with my eyes, my nose, my entire face reflected back at me. A wave of vertigo washed over me, and I had to sit down on the dusty floorboards. Picked up the note. It read, "Biological mother, Dr. Elena Washington, deceased 1995. Paternity, unknown. All related details sealed by court order to protect the child from media attention following the case. Dr. Elena Washington." The name sent a jolt through my entire body. I knew that name. Everyone in the legal and activist world knew that name. She was a legend. A brilliant, fiery civil rights lawyer who had fearlessly taken on some of the country's biggest and most corrupt corporations. She had died suddenly, tragically, at the absolute height of her career. And she was my mother. The world tilted on its axis. I wasn't an accident or an unknown. Came from her. A woman of immense power, courage, and principle. Why was it all a secret? And who was my father? The cruel taunts at work about me being a token suddenly felt like a sick, cosmic joke. That single revelation in the dusty attic changed everything. The fear and shame that had been my constant companions for months burned away, replaced by a cold, hard, clarifying anger. I returned to Chicago not as a timid victim, but as a daughter with a legacy to honor. The bullying at work, however, had escalated. The company announced a mandatory team-building retreat. The thought of being trapped in the woods with my tormentors for an entire weekend was horrifying, but attendance was non-negotiable. The retreat was every bit the nightmare I had anticipated. On the final night, gathered around a large campfire, the team was encouraged to share funny work stories. It was the perfect stage for them. "Hey, remember Aisha's big pitch for the Reynolds account?" Mike started, his face illuminated by the flickering flames, a malicious glint in his eyes. It was like watching a fish try to climb a tree. The entire group erupted in laughter. They jabbed each other with their elbows in a cruel pantomime of their private joke at my expense. I couldn't take it anymore. I slipped away from the circle, the sound of their laughter chasing me as I walked towards the dark, silent lake. A few minutes later, Sarah found me standing at the water's edge. "You know, you're really out of your depth here, Aisha," she said, her voice low and venomous, stripped of its usual public charm. "You don't have what it takes. You should just quit before you embarrass yourself even further." That was the last straw. The daughter of Dr. Elena Washington did not run. She fought. The moment I returned to the city, I took my meticulously collected evidence. The emails, the photos of the notes, the secret audio recordings I had started making of their taunts, and I found a lawyer. Her name was Lena. She was sharp, no nonsense, and after hearing my story and seeing my evidence, she took my case pro bono. "They're not just bullies, Aisha," she said, her eyes hardening as she looked over the files. "What they've been doing is illegal, and we're going to hold them accountable." We filed a formal harassment and discrimination complaint. A hearing was set in a federal courtroom. The day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. I sat beside Lena, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap my knuckles were white. Across the room, Sarah, Mike, and Mr. Harper sat with their team of expensive corporate lawyers. Sarah shot me a look of pure, unadulterated contempt. When it was my turn, I took the stand. My voice trembled at first, but it grew stronger and steadier as I recounted the endless series of slights, the calculated humiliations, and the suffocating isolation. "It wasn't just jokes," I said, the tears I had held back for so long finally streaming down my face. "It was erasure. They were trying to make me feel like I had no value, that I didn't deserve to be there." When they testified, Sarah smirked through her denials. Mr. Harper spoke clinically about team dynamics and cultural fit. Mike brazenly claimed it was all just harmless office banter. The judge, the Honorable Rebecca Klein, a formidable woman with a reputation for being tough but fair, listened to every word, her face an unreadable mask of neutrality. Then Lena's legal motions, which had forced the company to turn over their servers, unearthed a treasure trove of horrors. She presented to the court internal emails between Sarah and Mike explicitly plotting my phasing out, and a private group chat filled with racist memes and jokes about me. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. The mask on Judge Klein's face finally cracked, replaced by a thundercloud of fury. But the real bombshell was yet to come. During his cross-examination of me, the defense lawyer asked a bizarre, seemingly irrelevant question. "Miss Thompson, you are adopted, is that correct?" To your knowledge, do you have any family ties to any prior legal cases involving Harper and Sons? The question prompted Judge Klein to do something highly unusual. She slammed her gavel down, sealed the courtroom to the public, and called my adoptive parents, who had just arrived to support me, into her private chambers along with me and the lawyers. "Miss Thompson," the judge said, her voice now softer, more serious. "Your adoption file is flagged and linked to a sealed case from 1995. A case that was adjudicated in this very court." She paused, her piercing blue eyes locked on mine. "Your biological mother, Dr. Elena Washington, shortly before her death, she filed a landmark discrimination lawsuit against Harper and Sons. The air was sucked from my lungs. My mother had sued this firm. The case was sealed after her untimely death," Judge Klein continued, her expression grim. "The firm argued that the immense stress of the lawsuit led to the cardiac event that took her life. Harper and Sons settled with her estate for an undisclosed sum, and all records were buried. It was history, horrifically repeating itself." "There's more," she said, looking at a document a clerk had just handed her. "During the discovery phase of that original case, paternity was brought into question. A court-ordered DNA test was mandated but was never processed following Dr. Washington's death. We returned to the now silent, open courtroom. Judge Klein had ordered a rushed DNA comparison between me and the preserved genetic material from the 1995 case file. A large screen was lowered from the ceiling. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I risked a glance at the defense table. Mr. Harper was ashen. He looked like a man watching his own execution. He knew. In that moment, I realized he had known all along. The DNA expert from the lab cleared his throat, his voice echoing in the tense silence. "Your Honor, the results of the expedited comparison are conclusive." He clicked a button on his laptop, and 2 DNA profiles appeared on the screen side by side. A series of genetic markers lit up in green, a perfect, undeniable match. Based on the genetic evidence from the 1995 sealed case file, the biological father of Aisha Thompson is. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. Mr. Robert Harper. Absolute, deafening silence fell over the courtroom. Mr. Harper, the firm's founder. The man who sat by and said nothing while I was tormented. The man who let them laugh at me and steal my work. He was my father. The whispers, the elbows, the exclusion. It wasn't just racism. It was a sick, twisted, and cruel test, orchestrated by my own father to see if the secret daughter he never acknowledged was strong enough to survive his toxic world. The courtroom erupted into chaos. I couldn't hear any of it. My entire world had narrowed to the sight of Mr. Harper, who had buried his face in his hands, his whole body racked with deep, pathetic sobs. "I just wanted you to be strong," he would confess later, his voice broken and pleading. "Like her. Like Elena. I saw her fire in you the first day you walked in, and I was scared. I was a coward. I thought if I pushed you, if I let them test you, you would prove you were hers. That you were mine. But I didn't make you stronger. I broke you." Judge Klein's gavel fell one last time, the sound final and absolute. Her ruling was swift and brutal. The firm was hit with millions of dollars in fines for the current violations and for the historical cover-up of my mother's case. Sarah and Mike were fired on the spot, their careers in ruins. A significant portion of the financial penalty was ordered to be paid directly to me, not as damages, but as reparations for a generational wrong. It was justice, but it felt like a strange, bittersweet, and hollow victory. As I walked out of the courthouse, flanked by my real parents, John and Mary, the ones who had chosen me, the ones who had loved me without condition or test, I felt a profound sense of clarity wash over me. The heavy cloak of guilt and inadequacy I had carried for so long finally dissolved. It was never my guilt to carry. It was theirs. I was never the outsider. I was never the token. I was the daughter of a queen and the shameful secret of a coward. And now, after a lifetime of fighting to earn my place, I was finally, truly free to write my own story. Thank you for listening to my story. Please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, leave your like, and share this video with others.